I shouldn't be telling you this, but something happened in that school, something no one talks about. Everyone says the noises were just the pipes, or the wind, or my imagination. But I know what I heard. The building was alive. It breathed in the dark. You could feel it in the floor, hear it in the walls, smell it in the air. 3 janitors worked there on the night shift. Only one made it through the end of the year. The others left and never came back. People say they still hear things moving down in the basement, like someone still cleaning after hours. If you keep listening, you might hear it too. Welcome to the story I was told never to share. Subscribe before the lights go out. They told me not to talk about what happened down there, but since you're still here, you should know how it really started. It was a regular night shift, same as every other one. I clocked in, grabbed my cart, and started my rounds. The school was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I didn't mind at first. I liked being alone. No kids, no teachers, no noise. Just the hum of old lights and the sound of my own footsteps. But that night, something felt different. The air was heavier. The halls seemed darker, even with the lights on. My list of tasks was taped to the cart like always, but when I read it, my stomach dropped. Bring up folding chairs from basement storage. I stared at those words for a long time. Everyone on staff knew the basement was bad news. It always felt wrong down there, like it belonged to someone else. The walls sweated. The lights buzzed. The air never moved. But I didn't want to look lazy, so I took my flashlight and went anyway. The stairwell door was heavy, and it slammed shut behind me with a sound that made my chest tighten. The first few steps echoed like I was walking into a tunnel. When I reached the bottom, I flipped the light switch. Only 2 lights flickered on, barely lighting the hallway. The rest was pure black. I turned on my flashlight and started walking. It smelled like wet concrete and something else, something sour, like old water trapped in the walls. The sound of my boots seemed too loud, so I tried to move quietly. The first storage room was full of broken desks stacked to the ceiling. The second one had the chairs I needed. The door creaked when I opened it, and dust floated up into the light. I bent down, grabbed a few chairs, and that's when I heard it. A dragging sound. Slow, heavy, like someone sliding their foot across the floor just outside the room. I froze. My heart was beating hard enough to feel it in my throat. I listened. Nothing. Just silence, thick enough to hurt my ears. I told myself it was the pipes. Old buildings make noise. I picked up the chairs and stepped into the hallway. The air hit me like a freezer. There were no vents down there, no windows. Nothing that could make a draft. But the cold came from somewhere. It brushed against my face, and I swear it felt like breath. I set the chairs at the bottom of the stairs and went back for more. This time, something was different. One of the stacks had shifted. A chair had fallen slightly forward, just enough to make me stop. I stood there for a moment, looking at it, trying to remember if it had looked like that before. I told myself I was imagining things and bent down to grab more. Then came the sound again. The dragging, louder this time, followed by a dull thump. I lifted the flashlight, pointing it down the hall. About 20 feet away, one of the classroom doors that should have been locked was cracked open. I froze. Every door down there stayed locked. Always. I called out, "Hello." My voice came out shaky small. No answer. Just the sound of water dripping somewhere far off. I took one step toward the open door, then another. The beam of my flashlight trembled over the concrete. The closer I got, the colder the air felt. I reached out and pushed the door open fast. The room was empty. Shelves, boxes, dust. Nothing else. I let out a shaky laugh, trying to calm down. I turned to leave, but before I took a full step, I heard it again. Behind me, in the hallway, a slow shuffle, like someone dragging their shoes across the floor. I spun around, flashlight shaking, but there was no one there. Just the hallway stretching out into the dark. My skin prickled all over. I started backing away, keeping the light in front of me, walking faster and faster until I was almost running toward the stairs. When I reached them, I grabbed the chairs I'd left and climbed 2 steps at a time. My legs felt weak. I didn't look back. When I reached the top, I slammed the door shut and locked it, even though I wasn't supposed to. I stood there, breathing hard, my hands shaking. For a while, I thought I was fine. Maybe it was nothing. But a week later, while mopping the hallway above that same stairwell, I heard 3 hard bangs from below, evenly spaced, slow, like someone hitting the wall with their fist. Then the handle on the basement door started to rattle. It sounded like someone was pushing from the other side, trying to get out. I didn't move. I just stood there, gripping the mop, staring at that door. The rattling stopped. The hallway went quiet again, like nothing ever happened. But I couldn't unhear it. After that, I stopped going down there alone. If anyone needed something from the basement, I'd wait until another janitor was around. Sometimes I'd catch the door moving slightly when I walked past, like the air on the other side was breathing. People say old buildings make sounds, but I know what I felt. Something down there was moving, something that didn't want to be alone. And every time I think about those slow dragging footsteps behind me, I still feel that same cold air brushing against my face, like it's waiting for me to come back. After what happened in the basement, I tried to convince myself that it was just nerves. I stopped thinking about it, or at least I tried. But a few months later, when I transferred to another school in the same district, the same feeling came back. Different building, same quiet. Only this time, it wasn't the basement that bothered me. It was the 3rd floor. That school was huge, 4 stories tall, 2 gyms, and long hallways that seemed to go on forever. During the day, it was loud and bright. At night, it felt like a completely different world. The lights flickered, the air buzzed, and the silence had weight. Most of the time, I worked with another janitor, but that night, I was alone. My partner had called in sick, and I didn't want to lose hours, so I stayed. I started my shift like normal. Empty trash cans, wipe desks, mop the hallways. By midnight, I was on the 3rd floor. That floor always made me uneasy. Half the classrooms up there weren't used anymore. Some were locked, others filled with old furniture and boxes. It always smelled like chalk and dust, even though no one had taught there in years. As I walked, my footsteps echoed back to me. The sound bounced off the lockers, and I kept thinking I heard someone else walking too, just half a step behind me. Every time I turned, the hallway was empty. I told myself it was just the echo. I was halfway down the hall when I noticed one of the classroom doors was slightly open. That caught my attention right away, because I had checked it earlier. I knew it had been locked. I stopped and stared at it for a second, then walked over slowly, pushing the door open with my flashlight in hand. The beam swept across the room. Desks stacked against the wall. Boxes in the corner. Nothing out of place. But one of the boxes near the back had been moved. It was tilted sideways, like someone had dragged it. I frowned, crouched down to check for footprints or maybe signs of rats, but the dust was untouched. The air felt thick, like the room hadn't been opened in a long time. I told myself I was imagining it, closed the door, and went back to mopping. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every few minutes, I'd glance behind me. The shadows looked deeper. The light from my mop bucket flickered on the wet floor. I kept telling myself to stop being stupid. I was almost done anyway. I made it halfway back down the hallway when I froze. The same classroom door was open again. I stared at it, my mouth going dry. I had just closed it. I knew I had. The door was now wide open, and the light inside was flickering like something was moving. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. My first instinct was to run, but I couldn't look away. I started walking toward it, slow, like something was pulling me in. When I reached the doorway, I whispered, "Hello." The sound came out shaky and small. No answer, just silence. I stepped inside, the beam of my flashlight cutting across the room. Everything looked the same, except the box that had been in the corner was now in the middle of the floor. I felt the air change. Colder, heavier. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and fast. Then I realized there was another sound, breathing that wasn't mine. It was coming from the back of the room. Slow, deep, human. I froze. My flashlight started shaking in my hand. The sound didn't stop. It was like someone was standing just behind the last row of desks, breathing on purpose, slow enough for me to hear every inhale. I said, "Who's there?" My voice cracked. Nothing moved, but the breathing got louder. I backed toward the door, keeping the light pointed straight ahead. Then I ran. I didn't care how loud my footsteps were. I ran all the way down the hall, through the stairwell, and stopped only when I reached the first floor. I stood there for a while, trying to catch my breath. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone. I called my supervisor, told him someone might be in the building. He said he'd be there in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt endless. Every sound made me jump, the hum of the lights, the creak of the floor, even the faint wind outside. When he finally arrived, I went back up with him. We checked the classroom together. The box was still sitting in the middle of the room. Everything else looked untouched. He laughed, said I was tired, maybe hearing things. I didn't argue, but I didn't believe him either. The air still felt wrong. Heavy, like it was hiding something. For the rest of the shift, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I passed that hallway, I felt eyes on me, even when I wasn't looking. The next week, I made sure I never worked alone again. But even with another janitor around, the third floor always felt colder than the others. A few weeks later, one of the older guys told me a story. He said that years ago, a student had hidden in that same classroom overnight as a prank. No one found him until the morning, when the teacher opened the door and saw him standing there, pale and shaking. The kid wouldn't talk about what happened. He dropped out soon after. They stopped using that room after that, but no one ever said why. The story was supposed to be funny, a bit of local ghost gossip, but it didn't make me laugh. Because the night I heard that breathing, I felt something in that room that wanted me to know it was there. Something that didn't want me to leave. Even now, I still think about that night. Sometimes when I'm walking down an empty hallway, I catch myself listening for it, the slow, steady sound of breathing that isn't mine. And when the air goes still and cold for no reason, I stop moving. Because deep down, I know that room on the third floor is still awake, waiting for someone else to open the door. The next school I worked at was older than the others. It had the kind of history that people joked about but didn't really want to talk about. Built in the early 1900s, its hallways were lined with fading photographs of students long gone. But the worst place, the one everyone avoided after dark, was the auditorium. It was massive, with 3 levels of seats, thick velvet curtains, and a stage big enough to fit an entire class. During the day, it looked fine, just another part of the building. But at night, when the lights were off and the echoes stretched too long, it felt like the room had a pulse. The air was thick and still. Every sound bounced around until you couldn't tell where it came from. I usually saved the auditorium for last. It made sense. Start at the offices, end with the big room. But the truth was, I just didn't want to go in there until I had to. Something about it always made my stomach twist. Maybe it was the smell of old wood and dust, or the way the lights flickered even when the wiring was new. One winter night, I had to clean it earlier than usual because there was a school play the next morning. I remember pushing my cart in through the side door, the hinges screeching as I opened it. When it slammed shut behind me, the sound echoed through the entire space, then died too fast, like something had swallowed it. I started sweeping between the rows of seats. The metal ones creaked as I passed, and the sound bounced back from the walls in strange ways. I told myself to focus on the work, sweep, move forward, don't think. After a few minutes, I heard something. A soft sound, like fabric brushing against the stage curtains. I froze and turned my flashlight toward the stage. Nothing, just dust swirling in the air. I kept sweeping, telling myself it was just a draft. But then I heard it again. This time it was clearer, slow, heavy footsteps crossing the stage. I stood still, the broom in my hand. The sound stopped. My eyes searched the dark corners, half expecting to see someone. The stage was empty. The curtains didn't move. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing just behind them. I decided to check. My flashlight beam wobbled as I climbed the steps. Every board groaned under my weight. Behind the curtain, there were props, old ropes, broken scenery boards leaning against the wall. Nothing out of place. No one there. I told myself I was being paranoid, but as I turned to step off the stage, I swore I heard someone whisper my name. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear. Just a faint, drawn-out whisper that made my skin crawl. I froze, staring out into the empty seats. "Hello," I said, my voice sounding small in the huge room. Silence. Then another sound, this time coming from the balcony above me. Footsteps again, slow and steady. I shined my flashlight upward. The beam swept across the seats, catching bits of dust in the air. For a split second, I thought I saw someone sitting near the middle row. A dark shape, shoulders hunched, head tilted toward me. I blinked and it was gone. The seat was empty. I laughed nervously, told myself it was a shadow, just my brain playing tricks. But when I turned back to my cart, the whisper came again, closer this time, right next to my ear. It said my name, soft and drawn out. I dropped the flashlight and the beam spun across the floor, lighting up the walls and ceiling like lightning. I grabbed it, heart pounding so hard it hurt. "Who's there?" I yelled. My voice echoed back, stretching, breaking, as if someone was repeating it from far away. The air felt colder now. I could see my breath when I exhaled. I backed toward the exit, keeping the flashlight steady. Then, from above me, came the sound of footsteps again, crossing the balcony, slow and steady, back and forth like someone pacing. I didn't wait. I turned and ran for the side door, the sound of my boots slapping the floor echoing through the room. When I pulled the door open, the cold night air hit me like a wall. I stepped outside, gasping, my breath turning to fog. I could still hear the footsteps faintly, echoing from inside even after the door slammed shut. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, half expecting it to open on its own. It never did. The next morning, I told another janitor what had happened. He laughed and said it was just the building. "That place makes weird noises," he told me. "Always has. You get used to it." I nodded, pretending to agree, but deep down I knew he was wrong. There was something inside that auditorium that wasn't just noise. A week later, one of the teachers mentioned something I'd never heard before. Years ago, during a play rehearsal, the drama teacher had collapsed on stage and died of a heart attack. It happened right in front of the students. After that, no one liked being in there alone. They said sometimes you could hear him walking the stage late at night, still giving notes to actors who weren't there. I wanted to laugh it off, but I couldn't. Because when I heard those footsteps, they weren't random. They were slow, measured, like someone pacing, thinking, waiting for their turn to speak. I stopped cleaning the auditorium after that. I refused to go inside, even during the day. But sometimes, when I walked past the doors, I thought I heard something on the other side. The faint sound of shoes moving across the stage. People say ghosts don't exist, that it's just sound, memory, and fear playing tricks on your mind. I used to think that too. But after years of cleaning empty schools in the dark, I've learned something else. Some places don't forget, and some people don't leave when they're supposed to. I've quit that job now, but I still dream about that auditorium. In my sleep, I'm standing in front of the stage, broom in hand, the lights flickering above me. And every time, before I wake up, I hear it again, someone whispering my name from the balcony, asking if I'm ready to clean up. People always ask if I believe in ghosts. I never know what to say. I don't think it's about believing anymore. It's about knowing when a place feels wrong. After working so many night shifts in schools, you start to notice the same pattern. Every old building has something in it that doesn't sleep. Maybe it's the air, maybe it's memory, or maybe it's something that never left. I've worked in 3 different schools, and each one had a story. The basement that breathed, the classroom that exhaled in the dark, the auditorium that whispered my name. They were different places, but they felt connected, like the same presence had followed me from one to another. No matter how many times I changed jobs, I could still feel it close behind me. The sound of slow steps, the air turning cold for no reason, that heavy silence pressing against my chest. Most people never see these buildings at night. They only know the hallways when they're full of light and noise. But when the sun goes down and the last door locks, everything changes. The walls creak differently. The shadows move slower. The air gets thicker. You start to hear things you can't explain, the soft scrape of something against the floor, the echo of footsteps where there shouldn't be any, the faint sound of breathing when you're the only one there. At first, I told myself it was just me. Long hours, tired eyes, too much coffee. But it kept happening. No matter what school I worked at, there was always one spot that felt wrong. A door that opened by itself. A light that never stayed on. A sound that stopped the second I looked toward it. It was like each building had its own pulse, and I was the only one who could hear it. One night, I stayed late to help a new guy finish his route. He was young, still joking around, still thinking the ghost stories were just that, stories. We were cleaning a gym, and the whole time he was laughing about the haunted school, stuff people told him. I didn't laugh back. He noticed. "You really think there's something here?" he asked. I looked at the floor for a moment before I said, "Not just here. Everywhere." He smiled, but he didn't say anything after that. When we finished, we walked past the auditorium doors. The lights were off, but something made me stop. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe habit. I looked at the door handle and realized it was moving slightly. Just a slow, steady shake. He saw it too. His smile disappeared. We didn't say a word. We just kept walking until we were outside, under the streetlights. He didn't laugh about ghost stories after that. People think buildings are just concrete and steel, but they're wrong. Every sound, every voice, every fear leaves a mark. Some of those marks fade. Others stay. You can feel them if you listen long enough. The problem is, once you start listening, you can't stop. That's when it finds you. I've thought about going back to one of those schools during the day, just to see what it feels like with sunlight coming through the windows. But I never do. I know that even in daylight, the air would still be heavy. The silence would still have weight. Some things don't care if it's night or day. They just wait. Sometimes when I'm home alone, I'll hear a sound that reminds me of those nights. The creak of a door, the tap of a pipe, the soft drag of something across the floor. I tell myself it's nothing, just the house settling. But deep down, I know that's exactly what I used to tell myself right before everything started. Maybe that's how it works. It starts small. A sound, a draft, a whisper that sounds almost like your name. I don't clean schools anymore. I work during the day now with people around. But even surrounded by noise, I'll catch moments when everything goes quiet. Too quiet. And for a split second, I feel like I'm standing in that basement again, with the air cold against my skin and the sound of footsteps somewhere behind me. If you ever find yourself in a dark hallway and you feel that chill, don't stop. Don't look back. Just keep walking. Some places remember everyone who ever stepped inside. And if you listen too long, they might remember you too. Every story you've heard tonight had one thing in common: the silence that comes after the lights go out. The basement, the classroom, the auditorium, they were just buildings, but something inside them stayed awake. The janitors who worked there weren't crazy. They weren't making it up. They were people just like you, trying to finish a night shift and get home before sunrise. But when you spend enough time alone in places that should be empty, you start to realize they aren't. Maybe ghosts aren't what we think they are. Maybe they're not people at all. Maybe they're what's left behind when fear soaks into the walls. Every sound, every heartbeat, every scream, maybe it leaves an imprint, and over time, the building starts to replay it. That's what I tell myself anyway. Because the other answer, the one that means something was down there with me, something aware, that's harder to live with. If you ever find yourself in a quiet hallway at night and you hear something move when it shouldn't, don't stop to listen. Don't go looking for it. Leave. Walk away. The worst mistake you can make is giving it attention. Whatever's in those places, it wants to be noticed. And once it knows you can hear it, it doesn't forget you. Some people laugh when they hear stories like this. They say, it's just your mind playing tricks. But they don't know what it's like to feel cold air brush your skin when there's no open window, or to hear someone whisper your name when you're the only person there. They don't know that kind of fear, the kind that crawls under your skin and never really leaves. The next time you pass an old school, look at the windows. You might see a light flicker even though the power's off. You might think you saw movement behind the glass. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just the building breathing. But maybe it's something else, waiting for someone new to come inside and listen. Remember this, the quiet doesn't mean you're alone. It just means everything else is listening. If you enjoyed these stories, stay with us. There are more halls to walk, more doors to open, more whispers waiting in the dark. Subscribe before the lights go out, because once they do, you might realize you're not the only one awake.